What happens when a billionaire CEO falls for the one woman he can never have? When Alexander Cross realizes his brilliant assistant Naomi is more than just perfect at her job, he faces an impossible choice: risk everything for love or lose the woman who changed his world forever. If you believe love can conquer anything, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see how this impossible love story unfolds, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because you won't want to miss a single moment of this emotional journey. I never believed in perfection until I met Naomi Carter. Every morning at exactly 7:30, she walks through those glass doors wearing a confidence that fills the entire 42nd floor. Her heels click against the marble with purpose, and somehow that sound has become the soundtrack to my success. Naomi came from nothing, grew up in a neighborhood where dreams were luxuries most couldn't afford, but she refused to let her circumstances define her limits. While other kids were playing, she was studying, working 2 jobs to pay for community college, then clawing her way through business school with a determination that still takes my breath away. She doesn't just manage my empire, she is my empire. When the Tokyo deal was falling apart at 3 in the morning, Naomi was there, speaking fluent Japanese to investors while simultaneously drafting contracts that saved us millions. When our biggest client threatened to walk because of a shipping delay, she didn't panic. Instead, she chartered a private jet, hand-delivered the products herself, and returned with a contract extension that doubled our original agreement. She handles crisis like other people handle coffee, with ease and precision. The truth is, I'm completely dependent on her, and I didn't realize how dangerous that was until it was too late. Every decision I make goes through her first. Every meeting starts with her briefing. Every success story begins with her planning. But somewhere between watching her brilliance unfold and admiring her strength, something shifted inside me. I started looking forward to her morning coffee reports, not because of the numbers, but because of the way her eyes light up when she talks about new opportunities. I began staying late at the office, not because of work, but hoping she'd stay too. I told myself it was professional admiration. After all, Naomi Carter was the best assistant in the business world. She had to be. She was mine. But deep down, in those quiet moments when she'd lean over my desk to show me a presentation, when her perfume would fill the space between us, I knew I was lying to myself. I was falling for my assistant, and I had no idea how to stop it. It happened on a Tuesday night in October. The city was quiet below us, lights twinkling like stars through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. Most of the building had emptied hours ago, but Naomi and I were still there, buried in quarterly reports that couldn't wait until morning. She'd loosened her hair from its usual tight bun, and it fell in soft waves around her shoulders. I remember thinking she looked tired, but still beautiful in a way that made my chest tight. She walked over to my desk carrying 2 cups of coffee, the expensive kind she kept stocked in the break room just for our late nights. "You need to eat something," she said, setting the cup down carefully. "I ordered Chinese from that place you like." Her fingers brushed against mine as she handed me the coffee, and something electric shot through me. It wasn't the first time we'd touched accidentally, but this time, neither of us pulled away immediately. "Naomi," I said, and her name felt different on my tongue. She looked up at me with those dark eyes, and I saw something there I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I had noticed, but I'd been too afraid to acknowledge it. The air between us felt heavy, charged with possibility and danger. She was studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle, and I realized with startling clarity that she felt it too. This invisible thread that had been pulling us closer for months. "Mr. Cross," she whispered, but her voice caught on my name. That's when I knew I was in trouble, because Naomi Carter, my brilliant, untouchable assistant, was looking at me like I was more than just her boss. And God help me, I wanted to be so much more than that. The next morning, everything changed, but in the smallest ways possible. I walked into the office carrying 2 coffee cups instead of my usual one. "Your favorite," I said, placing the vanilla latte with extra foam on her desk. "From that little shop on 5th Street?" She looked surprised, her eyebrows raising slightly as she accepted the cup. "Thank you, Mr. Cross. You didn't have to do that." But her smile told a different story. She was pleased, maybe even touched. I started finding excuses to walk past her desk more often. Needed a file that could have been emailed. Had a question that could have been answered over the phone. Each time I'd linger just a moment longer than necessary, and each time she'd look up with those eyes that seemed to see right through me. The office began to buzz with whispers. Janet from accounting made comments about how I was treating my assistant awfully special lately. Mark from legal joked that I was finally noticing what everyone else already knew. But it was the small moments that undid me completely, like when I bought her favorite flowers, white orchids, and had them delivered to her apartment with a note that simply said, "For your outstanding work on the Morrison account." When she thanked me the next day, her cheeks were flushed pink, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Or when I started remembering every little detail she mentioned in passing. Her love for old movies, her fear of flying, the way she took her tea with honey instead of sugar. Naomi was confused, I could tell. She'd catch me staring and quickly look away, or stumble over her words when our conversations drifted from business to personal. But she wasn't pulling away. If anything, she seemed to be leaning in, waiting to see what I'd do next. "I need you to accompany me to dinner tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice casual as I stood by her desk. "The Yamamoto deal, they're traditional. They expect to meet my closest advisor." The lie slipped out so easily, but the truth was, I just wanted her there. Wanted to see her in something other than business attire. Wanted to sit across from her at a table meant for 2 instead of 20. She looked up from her computer screen, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Is this appropriate, Mr. Cross? I mean, shouldn't someone from the executive team handle this?" But even as she questioned it, she was already reaching for her phone to clear her evening schedule. That's when I knew she wanted to say yes as much as I wanted to ask. The restaurant I chose was intimate. Candlelit tables, soft jazz playing in the background, the kind of place where business deals went to become something more personal. When Naomi walked in wearing a black dress that hugged her curves perfectly, my breath caught in my throat. She let her hair down again, and she looked nervous but beautiful. "You look," I started, then stopped, remembering where we were, who we were supposed to be, but dinner felt nothing like a business meeting. We talked about everything except work. Her childhood dreams of becoming a teacher, my fear of never living up to my father's legacy, the books we both loved, the places we wanted to travel. When she laughed at my story about getting lost in Tokyo, her whole face lit up, and I found myself memorizing every detail. The way she gestured with her hands when she got excited, how she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, the soft sounds she made when she tasted the wine. We were leaning closer across the table, our conversation dropping to whispers, when my phone rang. Business emergency that couldn't wait. The spell was broken, but as I helped her into her coat, our eyes met in the reflection of the restaurant window. We both knew this hadn't been about business at all. "The Children's Hospital Charity Gala," I said, sliding the invitation across her desk. "It's next Friday. I'll need you there." Another lie, but I was getting better at them. The truth was, I'd been looking forward to this event for weeks, not because of the charity, though it was important, but because it was the perfect excuse to see Naomi in an evening gown. She picked up the invitation, frowning slightly. "Don't you usually take someone from your personal life to these events?" The question hung between us, loaded with meaning. We both knew I hadn't dated anyone seriously in years. Work had always been my priority, but lately, work meant being near her. "Consider it part of your job," I said, but my voice was softer than usual. "Besides, you know more about the hospital's programs than anyone. You organized my donations for the past 3 years." She nodded slowly, still looking uncertain. "What should I wear?" The question was practical, but something in her tone made my pulse quicken. Time choosing. That Thursday, a garment bag appeared on her desk with my business card attached. Inside was a midnight blue gown that I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing. When she emerged from the ladies' room that Friday evening, transformed, I forgot how to breathe. The dress hugged her perfectly, and she'd done something different with her makeup that made her eyes look even more stunning. The gala was torture in the most beautiful way. We sat together at the head table, And every time she laughed at something I said, every time her hand accidentally brushed mine, reaching for her water glass, I felt like a teenager with his first crush. When the orchestra began playing and couples filled the dance floor, I stood and offered her my hand. Shall we? Dancing with Naomi was like floating. She fit perfectly in my arms, and when she looked up at me during a slow song, her lips slightly parted, I almost kissed her right there in front of 500 people. Alexander, she whispered, the first time she'd ever used my first name. The sound of it made me dizzy with want. But then the flash of cameras reminded us where we were, who we were supposed to be. By Monday morning, the gossip blogs were calling her my mystery woman, and I could see the worry in her eyes. We started meeting at a little coffee shop 6 blocks from the office. Nothing fancy, just a place where two people could sit and talk without being recognized as Billionaire CEO and his assistant. I'd arrive first always, ordering her vanilla latte and finding a corner table where we could pretend to be normal. When she'd walk in, usually 5 minutes late because she was covering for both of us at the office, my heart would do this ridiculous skip that made me feel like I was 20 again. This is crazy, she said one morning, stirring honey into her coffee with more force than necessary. People are starting to talk. Janet asked me yesterday if we were... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. If we were what? I asked, even though I knew. Even though I wanted it to be true so badly it hurt. You know what? She said, but she was smiling, and that smile gave me hope. The flowers started arriving at her apartment every Tuesday. White orchids, always white orchids, because she'd mentioned once that they reminded her of her grandmother's garden. I never signed the cards, but she knew they were from me. The first time she thanked me for them, she was blushing and wouldn't meet my eyes. By the 4th week, she was teasing me about my secret admirer routine, and I loved that she felt comfortable enough to joke about it. Our weekend work meetings became my favorite part of the week. We'd meet at Central Park, supposedly to discuss quarterly projections, but we'd end up walking for hours talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her sister's wedding, how she'd been saving for 2 years to buy her a proper dress. I told her about my mother, how she died when I was 15, and I still missed her every day. It was during one of these walks that it happened. We were sitting on a bench, and she was laughing at something I'd said about my college roommate when I reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The laughter died on her lips, and suddenly we were just staring at each other. Alexander, she whispered, and then I was kissing her. Soft at first, then deeper when she kissed me back. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, she pressed her forehead against mine. We can't, she said, but her arms were still around my neck. I know, I replied, but I was already planning when I could kiss her again. Paris, I said, sliding the plane tickets across her desk. The merger with Dubois Industries requires an on-site presence. She looked at the tickets, then at me, suspicion and excitement warring in her expression. Both of us, she asked. It's a complex deal, I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. The deal was complex, but it could have been handled remotely. The truth was, I wanted to be alone with her, away from the office, gossip, and prying eyes. The flight was torture. Naomi sat beside me in first class, trying to maintain professional distance while I fought the urge to hold her hand. She fell asleep somewhere over the Atlantic, her head falling against my shoulder. I didn't move for the rest of the flight, content to breathe in her perfume and watch her peaceful face. When she woke as we were landing, she looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, I said softly. I didn't mind. I'd booked us separate rooms, of course, but when we arrived at the hotel, I made a decision that changed everything. There's been an upgrade, I told her, watching her face as the concierge handed her the key to the honeymoon suite. Her eyes widened. Alexander, I can't. This is too much. But I could see the wonder in her expression as she looked around the luxurious lobby. It's just a room, Naomi. A very nice room. That first night, we had dinner on the rooftop terrace overlooking the Eiffel Tower. The city sparkled below us like a fairy tale, and Naomi looked more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. She'd worn a red dress, bold and stunning, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. This doesn't feel real, she said, taking a sip of champagne. It feels like I'm living someone else's life. Whose life would you want to live? I asked. She looked at me over her glass, her eyes serious. Right now? Mine. Right here. Right now. This is exactly where I want to be. After dinner, we walked along the Seine, and when she shivered in the cool night air, I pulled her close. She didn't resist this time. Instead, she melted into my side, and I felt complete in a way I never had before. Back at the hotel, we stood outside her door, both knowing this was the moment of truth. Naomi, I said, touching her face gently, I know this is complicated, but I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I can't pretend either, she whispered. And then she was kissing me, soft and desperate and perfect, and I knew there was no going back. The photographs from Paris changed everything. Someone had captured us walking hand in hand along the Seine, and by Monday morning, they were everywhere. Cross Industries CEO's secret romance, the headline screamed. Billionaire's office affair exposed. But it was the comments that cut the deepest. They called Naomi a gold digger, a social climber who'd seduced her way to the top. They questioned her qualifications, her motives, everything about her except the truth, that she was the most capable, intelligent woman I'd ever known. The emergency board meeting was called for Tuesday. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, facing 12 disapproving faces that had known me since I was a child. Alexander, said Harrison Wells, my father's oldest friend, this is highly inappropriate. The optics alone could damage the company's reputation. But it was what he said next that made my blood boil. And with someone like her, people will assume she's using you for personal gain. Someone like her, I repeated, my voice dangerously low. You mean someone brilliant? Someone who's increased our profits by 30% in 2 years? Someone who speaks 4 languages and has an MBA from Harvard? But I could see it in their faces. They'd already made up their minds. To them, Naomi would always be just the assistant who'd gotten above her station. My stepmother chose that moment to deliver the final blow. The family trust controls 45% of your shares, Alexander. If you continue this relationship, we'll vote you out as CEO. You'll lose everything your father built. The threat hung in the air like poison. I looked around the table at these people who claimed to care about me, and I realized they only cared about their own interests, their own prejudices. That night, I found Naomi in her office, packing her personal items into a cardboard box. She looked up when I entered, and I could see she'd been crying. I heard about the board meeting, she said quietly. I won't let you lose everything because of me, Alexander. I won't be the reason your father's legacy is destroyed. Her resignation letter was already on her desk, signed and dated. My heart broke as I realized she was willing to sacrifice our happiness to protect me, even though I'd never asked her to. No, I said, ripping up her resignation letter. I won't accept this. But Naomi was already shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand, Alexander. I heard what they said about me. Gold digger, social climber. They think I seduced you for money, for status. How can we build a relationship on that foundation? I took her hands in mine, desperate to make her understand. I don't care what they think. I don't care about the company, the money, any of it. I care about you. We'll start our own company, build something together. I'll give up everything if that's what it takes. But she pulled away from me, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. You say that now, but what about in 5 years? 10 years? When you realize what you gave up for me, will you still feel the same way? When people look at us and see the billionaire who threw away his empire for his assistant, will you still love me then? Her voice broke on the last words, and I wanted to hold her, to promise her that nothing would ever change how I felt. You're not just my assistant, I said fiercely. You're my partner, my equal, the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. Don't you see that? But I could see the doubt in her eyes, the years of being told she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong in my world. She stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city lights below. My grandmother used to tell me that love wasn't enough, she said quietly, that you needed more than feelings to make a life together. You needed respect, equality, a foundation that couldn't be shaken by other people's opinions. We don't have that, Alexander. We may never have that. The next morning she was gone. No forwarding address, no phone number, just an empty desk and a note that said, "Please don't look for me. Let me go so you can have the life you're meant to live." But letting her go felt like letting go of my heart, my soul, everything that mattered. I stared at that empty desk and knew I had a choice to make, my empire or my love. And for the first time in my life, the choice was easy. I found her 3 weeks later in Atlanta, working at a small consulting firm and living in a modest apartment that broke my heart. She opened the door wearing jeans and a sweater, looking beautiful but tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well. "Alexander," she breathed, and I could hear everything in that one word: surprise, longing, pain. "What are you doing here?" "I sold my shares," I said simply. "All of them. Stepped down as CEO last week." Her eyes widened in shock, and she stumbled backward. "You what?" "Alexander, no, you can't have." "Why would you?" "Because I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life," I interrupted. "Because none of it means anything without you." I pulled out the business plan I'd been working on for weeks. "Cross Carter Consulting," I said, showing her the logo I'd designed. "Equal partners in everything. No more boss and assistant, no more power imbalance. Just two people who are brilliant at what they do, building something together." She was crying now, but I pressed on. "I've already secured 3 major clients who followed me from cross industries. We can do this, Naomi. We can build something that's ours." "You gave up everything," she whispered, touching my face like she couldn't believe I was real. "Your father's company, your legacy." "My father would have wanted me to choose love," I said, covering her hand with mine. "He always said that success without someone to share it with was just expensive loneliness. I was lonely for so long, Naomi, until I found you." She kissed me then, desperate and grateful and full of love. "I missed you so much," she sobbed against my lips. "I tried to forget you, tried to move on, but I couldn't. I love you too much." We held each other in her doorway while the rain started to fall, washing away all the pain and doubt of the past month. 6 months later, Cross Carter Consulting was thriving. We'd landed the biggest merger deal in the company's short history, and Naomi was being featured on the cover of Business Weekly as one of the top consultants under 30. But my favorite moment was still every morning when she walked into our shared office, coffee in hand, ready to conquer the world together. Our wedding was small and perfect, just our closest friends and family in a garden overlooking the ocean. As I watched Naomi walk down the aisle in her grandmother's pearls, in a dress that made her look like an angel, I knew I'd made the right choice. Love had won, just like I'd always hoped it would. We're partners now in every sense of the word, in business, in love, in life. And when people ask me if I regret giving up my empire for love, I tell them the truth. I didn't give up anything. I traded a cold, empty throne for a warm, full heart. I traded loneliness for love. And that's the best deal I've ever made. Did this story touch your heart? If you believe love should always win, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible love stories that prove anything is possible when two hearts refuse to give up. What would you sacrifice for true love? Let me know in the comments below.